understanding of what people in Puerto Rico and the leadership positions think about the relationship and the future of the relationship between the United States and Puerto Rico. I find myself, as others may too that are in this room, in a unique situation. I was born in the colony, and I'm a member of the Congress that holds the colony. In other words, I'm sort of holding myself by the neck, perhaps, if that's how I see it. I came here when I was very young. What I know in life, what I've learned in life, I learned in the Bronx, I learned in New York. But Puerto Rico is always part of my heart and part of who I am as a person. In fact, one of the arguments I always make that is always misunderstood to be a pro-statehood argument, but it's simply a pro-reality argument, is that we in New York have maintained ourselves as Puerto Ricans. We may do it with the Spanish that I sometimes kill quite a bit. It may be, although the professor thinks otherwise, that I speak it very well. It may be with wrapping pasteles in paper rather than leaves, but we've changed on the outside as the pasteles. We never changed on the inside. We always stayed the same. And so this film, I think, speaks to an issue that I believe, and I'll be, out of respect to those who disagree with me, I will be very careful about how I say this. Number one, I believe that the status issue has to be resolved. I believe it both as a person who was born in the colony, but I also believe it as a person who holds the colony, if you will, as a member of Congress. And there's one clarification I'd like to make. Whenever we discuss the Cuban issue, a lot of members of Congress, maybe people that you work for or work with, would say, well, that's a Cuban issue. Let's see what the Cuban members of Congress think about that. Well, no. It's the United States Congress that has an embargo on Cuba. Therefore, it's every member of Congress's issue. And when you have a territory in the Caribbean, I would call it a colony, people would say, well, what do the Puerto Ricans in Congress think about it? Well, that's nice to say that, but it also affects you. It's also your responsibility, because Puerto Rico did not invade the United States. As the film will show, the United States invaded Puerto Rico, and therefore everybody is responsible for it. Before we begin, I want to give, in order of appearance, a chance for my sister, Nydia Velasquez, to address you for a couple of seconds. She has to run to a, I know I didn't tell you. Just say hello. Okay, fine. You can't say I didn't give you a chance. She truly is my sister. She represents New York. And next to my son, who's a state senator, she's probably the best ally I have in the world in politics. Not that we're supposed to mention that. You know, in this profession, sometimes you turn your back and you don't know what's going to happen. I turn my back and I know she'll watch me all the time, and she can turn her back and knows that I always watch her. Which proves another point, that you can disagree on what the future of Puerto Rico is, but you don't disagree on being Puerto Ricans, and that's a uniqueness that we share. So Nydia, you said hello, and you're happy with that? I'm not going to get in trouble later? Okay. Let me then introduce to you the resident... Right. So I'm going to just take a second then, and you have to be very short, to introduce the resident commissioner of Puerto Rico. I don't know if many of you saw the book that just came out that has Hispanics in Congress. The irony is that whereas you say, well, there was a Hispanic here and a Hispanic there and a Hispanic there, there's been a Hispanic in Congress from Puerto Rico since what year, 1898 roughly? And that's part of the irony. So let me introduce Pedro Pierluisi, the resident commissioner of Puerto Rico.
Nydia, I'll be brief, so don't worry. Congressman Serrano just made an excellent presentation, and the movie speaks for itself. So I'm not going to belabor the point. All I'll say is that I represent Puerto Rico here in Congress, proudly so, and that I'm for equal rights for Puerto Ricans, wherever they reside. And as I see or envision Puerto Rico's future, there are two ways in which we can have equal rights. You can have equal rights by becoming a state of the union, right? If Puerto Rico becomes a state of the union, because then we would be treated the same as our fellow citizens in the States. Or we could have equal rights as a sovereign nation, Puerto Rico becoming a sovereign nation. Those are the two paths I see in Puerto Rico's future. I support statehood, but I respect those who advocate for Puerto Rico becoming a sovereign nation. So that's all I'll say. Take a look at the movie and enjoy it. Thank you for being here.
And let me introduce to you now Professor, right? Doctor, Professor Maquemanda, whatever you want to call you. Juan Agustin Marquez.
No, I'm the director of the film.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Professor, I haven't taught anything.
Okay. I was asking him to give you a title, but you know. Juan Agustin Marquez is a 2-time Emmy Award winner, and something tells me there's an Emmy hanging around this one too. So briefly, but please address us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I kind of like the title of professor too, but I haven't earned that. My name is Juan Agustin Marquez. I am a filmmaker from Puerto Rico. I am 34 years old, and I grew up in Puerto Rico. And ever since when I was young, the conversation has been in my house and in my neighborhood: should Puerto Rico become a state or not? And this is what we call in Puerto Rico the status conversation. And I have lived in Puerto Rico half my life, and I've lived in the United States half my life. And there's one thing that I learned about the United States is that this conversation has not been brought to the United States. In recent days, we've talked a lot about bringing the conversation. What does the conversation? We have to have a conversation. You have heard President Obama say we have to have a conversation about race. We have to have a conversation about climate change. We have to have a conversation about government reform and finance reform. But when is Puerto Rico going to be part of the conversation? And this is what we're trying to achieve with the film. Bring the topic of Puerto Rico as part of the national conversation, and to educate the rest of the nation in our struggles and our paradoxes. So this is what I'm hoping will happen, is that we will be talking a lot about Puerto Rico in the coming years, and hopefully very soon we will solve the status issue of Puerto Rico, whether it's through statehood or through sovereignty. Albizu Campos, one of the leaders of the independence movement, used to say, and I disagree with that the United States are deaf and they don't hear, and the only way to hear is through gunshots. And I disagree with that vision. But I'd like to talk about shots in terms of film. In this movie, we have a lot of shots, tiros de cámara, and I'm hoping that the United States will hear us through camera shots and not gunshots. I detest violence, and I think movies and documentaries are a great way for social change, and this is hopefully what's going to bring a lot of change to Puerto Rico. The documentary is interactive. Hopefully you'll be able to vote at the end of the film and express your opinion on Puerto Rico's status, and there's instructions how to do that. For those of you that would like to show the film to to either your boss or a congressional member, please contact me and I'll give you a private link. The film was 6 weeks in Puerto Rico in theaters, and hopefully it's going to be again in theaters in the States. But this is the most important presentation of the film for me right now, because the sovereignty of the people of Puerto Rico relies in Congress, and it's very important that the Congress of the United States understand this conversation. So this is our social media. You can hashtag and take pictures and all that. And without further ado, let's talk about Puerto Rico. Thank you. Oh, also I'd like to address that my parents are here. Thank you for coming. The producer of the film, Andres Anglas, is here. Thank you, Mr. Serrano and Mr. Puglisi. Thank you, Velasquez, Congresswoman, my co-star of the film, Congresswoman Velasquez. Thank you, Mr. Rosenblatt, for coming. And very special thanks to Frederick for organizing this. This is, thank you, sir. I know you worked really hard to make this happen. I really appreciate it. So without further ado, let's talk about Puerto Rico. Can we kill the lights, please? Thank you.